We don't really hang out with other people. We don't have much of a network of friends that we hang out. I don't hang out
How's
with
that?
anyone. Yeah. How is it? It sucks. Sucks.
Do you miss having more friends?
You know, I think there is some underlying resentment that Desean has against me about that dynamic.
For example,
I like to hear this as well. Yeah.
You don't know what I'm referring
I
to.
don't. Tell me.
Okay. I'm not much of a drinker. When people do that, they lose all sensibility of who they are and who they're supposed to be. Why be around that? There's no good in that relationship if they're forcing you to lose who you are. How is that good?
Can I just understand like the parameters here? Are we talking about the fact that you don't like Desean going out and drinking with his friends, or are we talking about an alcohol problem?
Yes.
Both?
Yes.
Okay.
Define alcohol problem. No, because if someone hears you say, I think Desean has a drinking
I didn't say
problem.
that.
So when she says, I'm worried because, he might have a problem, the first thing comes to mind is this person drinks all the time, every day, can't go without drinking. That's not the case. I don't drink, like, you consume more alcohol than I do. You drink more wine than I do on a daily basis. What she's trying to say when she says I have a problem is when I do go out, the once a year that I go out, the rare times that I go out.
Yeah, when you do go out.
Yeah. Maybe, I'll get a little sauced. Maybe,
Sauce like blackout hammered?
Not blackout.
Or...
But, I'm slurring words and,
So you get
and
drunk.
Yeah, I get drunk, and she doesn't like that.
I feel and believe that a person who doesn't have control or the wherewithal to know when they need to stop and doesn't stop is a problem.
Got it.
I feel like, if I had
Do you know what concerns you about that? What's the ultimate fear for you?
losing self-control,
What's the fear there? If you lose self-control, you...
are not conscious of what you're doing,
And then,
and then you can do anything,
like...
whatever that is.
But what is the fear?
It could be cheating. It could be
Cheating?
It could be that. It could be just recklessness.
What other than cheating, what other recklessness?
And so now because you're so used to drinking that way that you think you can drive. I feel like I'm saving his life.
Thank you, babe.
I really
You
do.
feel like you're saving his
Absolutely.
life.
Absolutely.
And you feel like
No fun.
no fun.
Yeah, no fun.
Now, see, I'm torn here with Elaine because I'm not a person about substances. When I was a youth, I did drink, okay, but it was also in the comfort and safety of my friends, okay? So I understand when even using the term sauced, I mean, Jesus, the way to age yourself, and I don't know what that says about me because I understood that, but I get that, okay? I'm not about it, but if people do it responsibly, okay, I'm not gonna be the killjoy and say, no, don't do that. I get what she's saying, that with the drink, with the libation, people can do things that they probably shouldn't. I know she mentioned cheating. That tends to happen with or without drinking, okay? I don't have the percentages, but yeah, I don't think that should be a factor. Drunk driving, okay? Yeah, you need to be drunk to go behind the wheel and do something stupid. I get that. But I think there's some underlying factor here in the sense that she wants to control this scene right here. When he goes out, it seems that she has a perception of how he will be around his friends. And he even said, hey, if I go out with my friends and I hang out, yeah, I may drink a little bit more than usual. That may happen, but it sounds like he's responsible. Okay, I'm gonna give the benefit of the doubt here. So again, I think there's something with her that's going on about this and hanging out with friends. And when Honora, the therapist, even asked, hey, how do you feel about not having friends? It wasn't like she said it was a bad thing. She just went about the worst part, which is him hanging out with friends, and then went to the drinking. So I don't think this is something that correlates. I think she has something else going on here.
Okay, so I think this is more of a fear on her end, and I like how the therapist was trying to ask her and make her push to say, what is your concern if he goes out and drinks with his friends? She asked that at least 3 times or more about what is actually your fear. So initially when I was looking at the clip, I'm thinking cheating. She think he's going to cheat. That's the first thing that came to my mind. I was wondering if she was going to say it. I don't honestly think she's worried about him drinking and driving. I believe they live in New York. A lot of people don't have cars in New York anyway. So I think it's one, the cheating aspect of it. 2, I feel when Desean goes out is more of an outlet, a release of all the stress he has at work, at home with his wife because of all the nagging that she does. I think it's just more of an outlet for him. And I didn't like how she said that he has a drinking problem. Wasn't kind of clarifying what she meant by that, I'm going to say, because normally when you say someone has a drinking problem, you think they're an alcoholic, where they are always in trouble. They're always drinking for whatever reason. And that's more of a negative connotation. So I can see where he was like, hey, what do you mean by that? So this is where their communication needs to be more in depth. Like, hey, when you go out with your friends and you're drinking, I don't like it for X, Y, and Z, and just be upfront and honest with what you really think, not beat around the bush. It's okay to say, I'm afraid you might go out and sleep with another woman. I'm afraid you might get blackout drunk and then get into a car accident if you decide to drive, whatever the case may be. But there's always more to it than what she's saying. I just wish for her, she's just more upfront about it, because 1, he's not going to read her mind. And 2, if you're just going around saying, yeah, he has a drinking problem, everyone has a different connotation of what that means, and it's usually going to be a bad thing.
You strike me as, what would be the good way to describe it, as like very intentional about the way you live life, right?
Yes.
Very
Yes.
intentional,
Yes.
right? That you're kind of leading your life, you're driving your own life, you're conscious about your choices. But, you know, as a psychoanalyst, I always wonder in those cases, okay, what are you afraid of? What's the other side of that? Like, why the need to drive so hard? What's
Because-
the shadow of that?
Just letting things happen.
But what's your history with letting things happen that has taught you, I better drive this life really hard, otherwise what?
You know, growing up in the household that I grew up in, there was not a lot of control.
Tell me.
My mother was very young when she had me, and her escape was probably, getting high. And so now you couple that with my father, who was there at the time, who was also getting high, who was young also,
And did they stay together?
for a long time.
Yeah.
But it was a volatile, violent, toxic, unhealthy, think of all of those adjectives,
Right.
environment.
Right. So kids, they're still kids,
And-
they're
and
doing
so-
drugs, they're...
All of that.
Yeah.
I left my grandmother's house when I was 15. I rented a
15.
room.
And they were okay with that?
They didn't have a choice because this is who I am.
Yeah.
I'm not coming back. And then I get myself pregnant by a guy who was an alcoholic, who used to wake me up with a punch in the face. And again, me being who I am, I'm a fighter, right? So we're fighting, right? And that was the life, right? Because that's what you did, because that's what your mother did, right?
Yeah.
That's just what happens.
Yeah.
I have my
So
son.
that's your son.
Right, I had my son, and a shift happened when I had what I call an out-of-body experience. I saw me on the floor and my son crawling. and me getting punched in the face on the floor. And that moment...
Wait. So this is a moment where your boyfriend...
My son's father...
he comes home drunk.
Long story short, I was very aggressive toward him the night before. And I kind of threatened him with a bat. And
because
he used to wake me up with a punch in the face, and I didn't want to get punched in the face, so I bought a bat. So I bought the bat from Modell's, and I drank coffee so I can wait up for him. And then when he came, I opened the door and I was like, you coming in? And he looked at me, looked at the bat a couple of times, and then he turned around and he left. I already knew the next day that it was going to be a situation because he's a macho man at that time.
So you're
young,
not going to
dumb,
get away with
macho
that.
Man. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, I got a bat. I got a bat and I'm going to just, do my thing with the bat. And he comes with his brother at the time and I get hit. And so when he hit me, I fall to the ground. And that's when I saw me on the floor and my son at the time was crawling. And I saw that. And the only thought in my head was, I don't want my son to think that this is life. I don't want my son to think that this is what you do. And I left that night with a backpack and a baby. I will never be in a situation where life just goes. I will always lead that. This is the first time that I'm not leading it.
Well, you're having a hard time
I
not
am
leading
having a
it.
tremendous hard time with that.
Yes.
But he views it different. And I'm like, I promise you I'm saving your life. Promise.
You're saving your own life.
Well, that too. That too.
I mean, what's less obvious in this kind of story is that you were actually kind of a kid and a young person going through all of this with not a lot of protection, and
No.
there's so much chaos and then violence around. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of trying to get to that part of things, the more vulnerable, to understand where the anxiety comes from that then shows up later in your relationship in the form of like, she's saving your life. When in fact, right now your life is not in danger. But your life was in danger.
In a matter of speaking, like
your life was in danger.
I never took it that way.
But it was.
I never took it that way.
Right, but
'Cause
are you hearing your own story? Because you left your body, you looked from up there, you didn't really pay close enough attention to the fact that you were really struggling for your life.
I've conditioned myself to detach. You went through it, you lived, keep it moving.
I get that. It's admirable. One of the problems with like managing life like that is that the stuff that you just detach from, that you look at from the ceiling, it continues to haunt, right? And it has kind of a shadow on now that you might want to at least know it's there and feel it a little bit more so that you can separate past from present.
So now, we get to it, somebodies. This is flat out projection because of her horrible upbringing. She didn't have one iota of happiness at all. So yeah, she's going to condition herself as a survivalist. And especially when she had her child and she says she had an out-of-body experience. But more so, she grew up with that with her parents. And the number one thing in life is when you come into this world, you hope you win the lottery with good parents, and she didn't, okay? She did not get that luxury. She didn't get lucky. So what do? It's survival of the fittest. You either adapt or you get eaten up by life, and she did adapt. And especially with the father, the person that she chose for her son that would wake her up with a punch. I mean, how else is she supposed to live? She has in her mind no choice, and I don't blame her. If that was the road that she took, that was given to her. And so now it makes all the sense. He's trying to prevent something from happening with Desean, but Desean, he seems like he's not even that kind of person at all. Okay, I'm sure he is just flat out shocked about this past, whether he knew it or not. This definitely sheds a lot of light on this, in the sense that this is her, and she can't change what's happened. I'm sure this is just PTSD, just continuing to simmer inside of her. So she said that not having control of this situation is killing her, because once she took control, then that was it. There was only one way to live for her, to always be able to control the situation at the moment. And again, she says she's saving Desean's life. I think both Jay and I have mentioned it. I don't think Desean's placing himself in that position to begin with, okay? Now, the reason I can relate to Elaine is because my upbringing, my mom didn't choose two of the best people, okay? My biological and my stepdad. My biological father, after he lost his mom, he just went into depression, and unfortunately, with the drink, started becoming violent with my mom. So that was not a good situation, left that. My mom's second husband, stepdad, he was just, as she said, a macho guy, tried to control her, and if she wouldn't listen, then, unfortunately, pal. That's all I need to say. So that's why I definitely sympathize with Elaine, because growing up with that, you try to do your best, and like she said, she left, went with a grandma, and I think she left the grandma at 15, I think, and went off on her own. It's not easy when that's what you see and that's what you witness. So I'm just glad on my end that I broke that chain, because I could never be able to do that or even contemplate that, because I would just remember my mom. And that's why I told myself, nope, never. This would never happen, and it never has, and it never will. So again, I am with Elaine. It's a tough road, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, when she first said that she used to get wake up with a hit in the face, my first initial reaction was, you need to leave ASAP. So when she actually said she got her bags, got her kid, and left, I was like, thank you, because a lot of people don't do that or feel they can't do that. So I'm glad she was able to do that regardless of her situation. But as far as everything else goes, I wish she would have gotten counseling before. I feel like she doesn't need couples counseling, it's more individual counseling. So just because she didn't work through this, because a lot of people who go through this type of trauma and issues, they don't work through it. They'll be like her, okay, I lived through it, on to the next. But not knowing what you're going through, you're gonna carry that into your relationship. So like how she grew up, normally people think, oh, if my mom gets hit, that means if I don't get hit, a man doesn't love me, type of thing, right? She kind of cut that part off, where it's like, okay, if he doesn't see it, he's not going to know this is what you're not supposed to do to a woman, or whatever the case may be, right? So, and this is something we told our kids recently as well. We talked about things like what you see in the household, most likely that's how you're gonna that's the type of relationships you're gonna be in. So if you see a good, successful relationship, you're gonna see the traits that you want in someone, and not the negative traits like she did growing up. So good for her. I'm glad she almost had like an epiphany. And sometimes I know she don't want to admit, it's like, I didn't see it that way, but the therapist trying to tell her, this is what it is. You can not want to see it that way all you want to, but this is what it is. And I know for her, it's like, you almost kind of got to drill it into her so she can see what's going on, and not project it all onto Desean, as Mafuchi said. 'Cause I think that's what it is. Like, you think he's going to do this to you, but if he's never showed those signs, most likely that's all in your head with your experience. So I'm glad she's in this therapy session where the therapist actually focus on where her trauma was and have her realize that, see what's going on. But yeah, I do feel, I felt for her when I saw that. I was like, oh, that explains so much. But it's like, when stuff like that happens, you really need to speak to someone and not just hold that in, because you don't know how that's affecting your relationship until your relationship is over.
Hey somebodies, come check out my channel, where I give you my candid thoughts and opinions on various topics and weird news reports. So stop by for some tomfoolery and ballyhoo. Cute little guy, eh?